124,000. That's how many prophets Allah sent to guide humanity. 124,000 voices crying out in the darkness, warning their people, begging them to turn back before it was too late. But history only remembers 25 by name. 25 men who didn't just speak truth, they bled for it. They were exiled for it. They watched their families torn apart for it. From Adam, the first soul to breathe air into his lungs and feel the weight of existence, to Muhammad, the last messenger, whose words would echo across 14 centuries and still shake the foundations of the earth today. These are not just stories. They are warnings. Every trial they faced, the betrayal, the mockery, the loneliness of standing for truth when the whole world calls you mad, is a trial we face today. Every test of faith they endured is carved into the DNA of our own struggles. And if you think these are ancient tales with no relevance to your life, you're not paying attention, because the same forces that drowned news people are rising again. The same arrogance that made Iblis refuse to bow is alive in every heart that thinks it knows better than God. The same corruption that Idris fought is rotting our cities from the inside out. So before you scroll past this video, ask yourself one question. What if these prophets weren't just messengers of the past, but mirrors showing us who we've become? But to understand where we are, we have to go back to the beginning, to the moment before time had meaning, to the first breath, the first sin, the first repentance. How did it all begin? When man first walked the earth. In the beginning, there was only light. Angels filled the heavens, worshipping in perfect harmony, never questioning, never faltering, and then Allah spoke. I will create a vicegerent upon the earth. The angels were confused. Will you place upon it one who causes corruption and sheds blood while we declare your praise and sanctify you? They couldn't understand. Why create something flawed when perfection already existed? But Allah knew what they didn't. He took clay, dark, rich earth from every corner of the planet, and molded it with his own hands. He shaped arms that would one day build civilizations, hands that would write poetry and wage wars, a heart that would love, break, heal, and break again. And when the form was complete, he breathed into it from his spirit. Adam opened his eyes, the first human, the first soul to carry the weight of choice. Allah commanded the angels, prostrate to Adam, and they did. Every single one of them bowed, not because Adam was divine, but because he carried something they never could. Free will, all except one. Iblis stood tall, his chest burning with rage. I am better than him, he hissed. You created me from fire and him from clay. It wasn't about Adam. It was about pride. The first sin wasn't murder, it wasn't theft, it was arrogance, the belief that I know better. And in that moment, Iblis became Shaitan, the rejected, the deceived, the eternal enemy. But the story doesn't end there. Adam was given paradise, a place where rivers flowed with honey, where trees bore fruit without labor, where every desire was fulfilled before it was even spoken. He was given Hawa, Eve, as a companion, created from his own essence so he would never feel alone. And there was only one rule: do not approach this tree. One boundary, one test, and Shaitan knew exactly where to strike. He whispered to them, not with threats, but with promises. Your Lord only forbade you from this tree, lest you become angels or live forever. He made disobedience look like enlightenment, and they ate. The moment the fruit touched their lips, everything changed. Their innocence shattered. They looked at each other, and for the first time they felt shame. They tried to cover themselves with leaves, scrambling, panicking, as the weight of their choice crushed them. And Allah called out, Did I not forbid you from that tree and tell you that Shaitan is to you a clear enemy? Adam could have made excuses. He could have blamed Hawa. He could have blamed Shaitan. But instead, he fell to his knees and spoke the words that would become the blueprint for every repentance that followed. Our Lord, we have wronged ourselves, and if you do not forgive us and have mercy upon us, we will surely be among the losers. And Allah forgave him, because that's what Adam was chosen for. Not perfection, but the ability to rise after the fall. He was sent down to earth, not as punishment, but as purpose, to be the first prophet, the first teacher, the first man to carry the message. No matter how far you fall, the door of repentance is never closed. Generations passed. Humanity spread across the earth, and with it, so did forgetfulness. People began to drift. They worshipped what they could see, the sun, the moon, the stars. They carved idols from stone and called them gods. They justified oppression with tradition, and into this darkness came Idris, a man so devoted to knowledge that he's said to have been the first to write with a pen. While others chased power and wealth, Idris chased wisdom. He studied the stars, not to worship them, but to understand the precision of their creator. He taught people to weave cloth, to farm with intention, to live with purpose. But his greatest gift wasn't knowledge, it was patience. Because calling people to righteousness in a corrupt society is not a battle won in a day. It's a war of attrition. Idris would stand in the marketplace and speak about accountability, about a day of judgment when every deed, every whisper, every glance, every secret buried in the dark would be brought to light. And they laughed at him. You're wasting your life, old man. Enjoy it while you can. But Idris didn't waver. He didn't need their approval. He didn't need them to understand. He only needed to deliver the message. And Allah honored him in a way unlike any other prophet. The Quran says, and mention in the book, Idris. Indeed, he was a man of truth and a prophet, and we raised him to a high station. Some scholars say he was lifted alive into the heavens. Others say his rank in paradise is unmatched. But the lesson is clear. When you stand for truth in a world built on lies, Allah elevates you, even if people try to bury you. But corruption didn't stop with Idris. It grew, it festered, and by the time Noah was born, the world had plunged into darkness so deep that people no longer even remembered what light looked like. They worshipped statues, they oppressed the weak, they mocked anyone who dared question the system, and Allah chose Nuh to deliver the final warning. But here's the thing about Nuh. He didn't give up after a year, or 10 years, or even 50. He called his people to Allah for 950 years. 950 years. Imagine that. Imagine waking up every single day for nearly a millennium knowing that today, just like yesterday, they will reject you. They will spit at your feet. They will call you insane. But you keep going anyway, because the message is more important than the response. Nuh tried everything. He called them publicly. He called them privately. He reasoned with them. He warned them. He wept for them. And they laughed. They said, Gochidu, you're just a man like us. Only the lowest of us follow you. Finally, Allah revealed to him, no one will believe from your people except those who have already believed. So do not be distressed by what they do, and construct the ship under our eyes. So Nuh began to build, in the middle of the desert, far from any ocean, far from any logic, and they mocked him even harder. What are you doing, old man? Building a boat on dry land? Have you finally lost your mind? But Nuh hammered every plank with certainty, because when Allah commands, you obey, even when it makes no sense. And then came the day. The sky split open. The earth erupted, water poured from everywhere, above, below, crashing together in a fury that swallowed everything. Nuh called out to his family, "Board the ship. This is the promise of Allah." But his son, his own blood, refused. "I will take refuge on a mountain," and he said, "It will protect me." And Nuh screamed across the rising waves, "There is no protector today from the decree of Allah, except for whom he gives mercy." But the water rose higher, and his son drowned. Nuh cried out to Allah, "My Lord, indeed my son is of my family." And Allah responded with words that shattered him. "He is not of your family. Indeed, he is one of unrighteous deed. Blood doesn't save you. Your last name doesn't save you. Only faith does." The flood cleansed the earth, and when the water receded, Nuh stepped onto a new world, emptier, quieter, but pure. But the question lingered in the silence. If a prophet's own blood could turn against him, what hope was left for his people? The earth was given a second chance. Nuh's descendants spread across the land, carrying the memory of the flood in their bones. For a while, they remembered. For a while, they feared Allah. But memory fades, and fear is forgotten by those who have never tasted consequences. Generations later, in the wind-swept deserts of southern Arabia, rose a civilization that would make the world tremble. The people of Addis, they were giants, not just in stature, but in arrogance. They built towers that pierced the clouds, palaces carved into mountains that seemed to say, "We are eternal. Death cannot touch us." They had everything: wealth that could buy kingdoms, strength that could crush armies, gardens that bloomed even in the desert, and they looked at all of it and said, "Who is greater in strength than us?" They forgot the one who gave them that strength. They forgot the one who could take it all away with a single breath. So Allah sent them Hud, one of their own, a man who walked among them, who spoke their language, who knew their pride intimately because he had once lived it. And he stood in their marketplace and said, "Worship Allah. You have no deity other than him. You are not but inventors of falsehood." They laughed. "O Hud, you have not brought us clear evidence, and we are not ones to leave our gods on your say-so." They called him a liar, a madman, a traitor to his own people. Hud warned them, "I fear for you the punishment of a terrible day." But they were too drunk on their own greatness to listen. And then the rain stopped, for days, then weeks, then months. The skies turned to bronze, their gardens withered, their livestock died. And still, they didn't humble themselves. They said, "This is just a cloud that will bring us rain." But it wasn't rain. It was a furious wind. It came from the horizon like a wall of darkness, roaring with a sound that split the earth. Imagine being there. Imagine standing in your palace, built to last 1,000 years, and feeling it shake. The wind didn't just blow, it hunted. It tore through their towers like they were made of paper. It ripped people from the ground and hurled them into the air like insects. For 7 nights and 8 days, it raged without mercy, and when it finally stopped, there was nothing left. No buildings, no bodies, just hollow palm trunks scattered across the sand, like the bones of a forgotten beast. One survivor, a man who had believed in Hud, stood on a distant hill and watched his entire civilization erased from existence. He later said, "It was as if they had never been there at all." The arrogance that made them feel invincible became the very thing that destroyed them. Because when you think you're too big to fall, you forget that Allah can make you smaller than dust. The lesson of Ad should have been carved into the soul of every generation that followed, but humanity has a short memory, and pride is a disease that finds a way to infect even the cautious. Not far from where Ad once stood, another people rose from the ashes, the people of Thamud. They had seen what happened to Ad. They walked past the ruins. They whispered the stories to their children as warnings. And then they made the exact same mistake. They carved homes into the mountains, fortresses that could withstand any storm, any army, any act of God. Or so they thought. They said, "Who can reach us here? Who can touch us in our strongholds?" And Allah sent them Salih, a righteous man, a prophet who begged them to turn back before it was too late. But they were comfortable. Comfort makes people deaf. They said, "You're just a man. Why should we follow you? Bring us a sign if you're telling the truth." So Salih prayed, and Allah answered in a way that defied all logic. From the solid rock of the mountain, a camel emerged, not born, not led, created, fully grown, breathing, alive. A creature that had no mother, no father, no origin except the will of Allah. Salih told them, "This is the she-camel of Allah, a sign for you. Let her graze freely in Allah's earth and do not touch her with harm, lest you be seized by a painful punishment." It was a simple test. One animal, one command. Just leave her alone. But simplicity is the hardest test of all, because it reveals what's really in your heart. At first, they obeyed. The camel grazed. She drank from the well on her day, and they drank on theirs. But resentment grew. The arrogant among them whispered, "Why should we share our water with a beast? Why should we be bound by the word of one man?" And one night they made a choice. They gathered in secret, they drew their blades, and they slaughtered her. The earth trembled. Salih's voice cracked as he stood over her body. "Enjoy yourselves in your homes for 3 days. That is a promise not to be denied." 3 days. That's all they had left. On the first day, their faces turned yellow. On the second day, red. On the third day, black. And they knew. They tried to repent, but it was too late. The angel of death doesn't wait for second thoughts. On the morning of the 4th day, a single piercing cry split the heavens. A blast so violent it stopped their hearts mid-beat. And they fell, every single one of them, frozen in place, as if time itself had killed them. Their mighty fortresses became their tombs. What happened when they slaughtered Allah's sign? They slaughtered themselves. But some sins don't just destroy the body, they rot the soul. And there are places on earth where corruption becomes so normalized that people forget it's corruption at all. They call it freedom, they call it love, they call it progress, and anyone who dares to say otherwise is called a bigot. This was the reality of Jerusem, the people of Lut. Sodom and Gomorrah, cities so wealthy, so advanced, so morally inverted that they had rewritten the very definition of right and wrong. They committed acts so vile that even the angels in heaven recoiled. They openly engaged in lewdness. They robbed travelers on the roads. They mocked the concept of modesty, of family, of natural order, and into this cesspool of depravity came Lut, a prophet who stood alone against an entire society that had lost its mind. He pleaded with them, "Do you commit such immorality as no one has preceded you with from among the worlds? Indeed, you approach men with desire instead of women. Rather, you are a transgressing people." And they responded, "Bring us the punishment of Allah, if you are truthful, or expel Lut and his followers from your city. Indeed, they are people who keep themselves pure." They mocked purity. They weaponized tolerance as a shield for wickedness. And when angels disguised as beautiful young men came to Lut's door as a final test, the people surrounded his house like a pack of wolves. They demanded he hand the guests over. Lut stood at the door, trembling, and said, "These are my guests, so do not disgrace me. Fear Allah and do not humiliate me." But they didn't care about fear. They didn't care about honor. They tried to break down the door, and that's when the angels revealed themselves. They struck the mob with blindness, and even then, the people stumbled around, still trying to find the door, still trying to fulfill their desires. The angels told Lot, "Take your family and leave during the night, and let not any among you look back, except your wife. Indeed, she will be struck by that which strikes them." So Lot fled, his family behind him, the city at their backs, and as the sun began to rise, Allah's command descended. The earth flipped. The cities were lifted into the sky, buildings, streets, people, everything, and then slammed back down, upside down, then rained upon with stones of baked clay, each one marked with the name of its victim. And Lot's wife, she looked back, maybe out of curiosity, maybe out of attachment to the life she knew. Maybe she didn't believe it would really happen. But she looked, and in that instant she turned to stone, a pillar of salt, frozen forever in the moment of her disobedience, a warning for every generation. You cannot hold on to Allah's mercy with one hand and the life of sin with the other. But corruption doesn't always look like Sodom. Sometimes it wears a suit. Sometimes it shakes your hand with a smile. Sometimes it looks like business as usual. In the land of Midian, the people had perfected the art of slow poison. They didn't kill, they didn't rape, they just cheated. A little here, a little there. Short waits, false measures, deceptive contracts. They robbed people with ledgers instead of swords and convinced themselves it wasn't really stealing. And Allah sent them Shu'aib, a prophet who understood economics, who spoke their language, who knew the game they were playing. He stood in the marketplace and said, "O my people, give full measure and wait in justice, and do not deprive the people of their due, and do not commit abuse on earth, spreading corruption." They scoffed. "Does your prayer command you that we should leave what our fathers worship, or not do with our wealth what we please? Indeed, you are the forbearing, the discerning." They mocked his faith. They called him controlling. They said, "Our money, our rules." Shu'aib warned them, "I fear for you the punishment of an all-encompassing day." But they were too comfortable, too confident, too convinced that their system was too big to fail, and then the earth split open beneath their feet, an earthquake, so sudden, so violent that they didn't even have time to scream. Their homes collapsed on top of them. Their wealth, piles of gold, silver, goods, buried them alive. And when the dust settled, the marketplace where they once cheated the poor was nothing but rubble and silence. They thought they could steal from people, and Allah wouldn't notice. They were wrong. 5 prophets, 5 nations, 5 warnings ignored. Had called his people away from arrogance. They were destroyed by wind. Salih gave them a miraculous sign. They killed it and were killed themselves. Lut begged them to abandon their perversion. They were flipped upside down. Shu'aib urged them toward honesty. They were swallowed by the earth. Do you see the pattern? These weren't random punishments. They were poetic justice. The people of Ad thought they were untouchable, so Allah made them dust in the wind. The people of Thamud built fortresses in stone, so Allah made those fortresses their graves. The people of Lut indulged in their desires without shame, so Allah turned their world upside down. The people of Midian stole from the earth, so the earth consumed them. Every single time the method of destruction reflected the nature of the sin. And here's the terrifying part. We are repeating every single one of these. Mistakes. We build towers of glass and steel and think we're invincible. We ignore the signs Allah sends us and kill them with mockery and legislation. We normalize what was once shameful and call it liberation. We cheat, exploit, manipulate and call it smart business. These prophets aren't ancient history. They are warnings written in blood, carved into stone, and echoed across time. And if we don't listen, history won't just repeat, it will bury us. But there was one prophet who would rise above them all, a man who wouldn't just call one nation, a man who would shatter the idols of an entire world, a man who would be tested in ways no prophet before him had ever been tested. His story doesn't start with miracles. It starts with a question that would change everything. Why do you worship what you carve with your own hands? His name was Ibrahim, and his fire was only the beginning. There are some men who are born into darkness and spend their entire lives searching for light. And then there are men like Ibrahim, born into a world drowning in idolatry, raised by a father who carved gods from stone and sold them in the marketplace. Every corner of his city, Ur in ancient Mesopotamia, was filled with statues. Gods of the sun, gods of the moon, gods of fertility, war, harvest, rain, gods for every problem, gods that couldn't hear, couldn't speak, couldn't save. And from the time Ibrahim was a boy, he looked at these lifeless statues and asked the question no one else dared to ask. Why do you worship what you carve with your own hands? His father, Azar, was furious. Do you reject my gods, Ibrahim? If you do not stop, I will surely stone you. But Ibrahim didn't stop. He couldn't, because when you see the truth, silence becomes betrayal. One day, when the people left for a festival, Ibrahim walked into the temple. Dozens of idols stared at him with empty eyes. He picked up an axe, and he smashed them all. Every single one, except the largest. He placed the axe in its hands and walked out. When the people returned and saw the destruction, they were enraged. Who has done this to our gods? Someone said, we heard a young man mention them. He is called Ibrahim. So they dragged him before the king, Nimrod, a man so drunk on power that he declared himself divine. They demanded an explanation. Ibrahim looked at the shattered idols and said calmly, rather, this, the largest of them, did it. So ask them if they are able to speak. The crowd fell silent. They knew the idols couldn't speak. But admitting that would mean admitting their entire lives were built on a lie. So instead they said, you know well that these do not speak. And Ibrahim's voice cut through the air like a blade. Then do you worship, instead of Allah, that which does not benefit you at all or harm you? Uff to you, and to what you worship instead of Allah. Then will you not use reason? Reason, the one thing they refused to use. Nimrod, his pride shattered, his authority challenged, stood up and declared, burn him and support your gods, if you are to act. So they built a fire, not just any fire, a fire so massive, so violent, that birds flying overhead fell from the sky, burned alive by the heat. They had to use a catapult just to throw Ibrahim into it, because no one could get close enough. And as Ibrahim was hurled through the air, bound in chains, hurtling towards certain death, the angel Jibril appeared beside him and asked, do you need anything? Ibrahim, calm, unshaken, replied, from you, no. From Allah, He knows my condition. And Allah commanded, O fire, be coolness and safety upon Ibrahim. The flames froze mid-air. The fire that had killed birds became a garden of peace. And when the smoke cleared, Ibrahim walked out, unburned, unbroken, untouched. The crowd stood in stunned silence. Nimrod's face twisted with rage. But Ibrahim didn't gloat. He didn't mock them. He simply walked away from a people who chose blindness over sight. Because sometimes the greatest miracle isn't surviving the fire. It's having the faith to walk into it in the first place. Years later, after Allah had blessed Ibrahim with a son, Ismail, in his old age, a son he had prayed for, wept for, waited decades for, Allah tested him in a way that would break most men. Ibrahim saw a dream. In Islam, the dreams of prophets are revelation, and in this dream he saw himself sacrificing his son. Imagine waking up from that. Imagine the weight of it. This wasn't a metaphor, this wasn't symbolic, this was a command. Ibrahim didn't argue, he didn't ask why. He went to Ismail, a young boy, innocent, trusting, and said, "O my son, indeed I have seen in a dream that I must sacrifice you, so see what you think." He gave his son a choice, and Ismail, with a courage that defied his age, replied, "O my father, do as you are commanded. You will find me, if Allah wills, of the steadfast." No hesitation, no fear, just submission. So Ibrahim took his son to the valley of Mina. He laid him down, face pressed against the earth, so he wouldn't have to see his father's face. He whispered a prayer. He raised the knife, and with tears streaming down his face, he pressed the blade against his son's throat. And the knife wouldn't cut. Allah had seen enough. He had tested Ibrahim's heart and found it pure. A ram appeared beside them, a substitute, a mercy, and the voice of Allah echoed, "O Ibrahim, you have fulfilled the vision. Indeed, we thus reward the doers of good." Ibrahim collapsed. Ismail wept, not from fear, but from gratitude, because they had both been willing to give everything, and Allah had given it back. That's the difference between sacrifice and loss. Sacrifice is when you let go for Allah. Loss is when it's taken from you. And Allah only asks for the first. From Ibrahim came 2 sons who would carry the covenant forward. Ismail, who would settle in the barren desert of Makkah with his mother Hajar, where they would discover the well of Zamzam and build the Kaaba, the house of Allah, the heart of the earth, and Ishaq, from whom would come a long line of prophets including Yaqub, Yusuf, Musa, Dawood, Suleiman, and Isa. The legacy of Ibrahim wasn't just faith, it was lineage, a bloodline of prophets who would carry the message through fire, famine, slavery, and exile. But legacy doesn't guarantee ease, and sometimes the greatest tests come from your own family. Yaqub, known as Israel, was a man of quiet strength. He had 12 sons, and among them one stood out, Yusuf, a boy so beautiful, so pure-hearted that his father feared for him. Yaqub loved Yusuf deeply, perhaps too deeply in the eyes of his other sons, and jealousy is a poison that turns brothers into strangers. One day the brothers came to Yaqub and said, "Why do you love Yusuf more than us? Send him with us tomorrow. Let him play. We will take care of him." Yaqub hesitated. Something in his heart warned him, but they insisted, so he let him go. And the moment they were alone, they tore Yusuf's shirt, threw him into a well, and left him to die. Then they returned to their father with crocodile tears and a shirt stained with sheep's blood, saying, "A wolf devoured him." But Yaqub looked at the shirt, perfectly intact without a single tear, and he knew they were lying. But what could he do? His sons had united in their deception. So he wept. He wept so much that his eyes turned white from grief. He wept so much that he became blind. And when his sons asked him, "Will you ever stop remembering Yusuf?" he replied, "I only complain of my suffering and grief to Allah, and I know from Allah that which you do not know." He never stopped believing, even when all evidence said his son was dead. Faith doesn't mean you don't feel pain. It means you don't let pain make you forget who holds your heart. But Yusuf wasn't dead. He was sold into slavery, taken to Egypt, worked in the house of a minister, and just when life seemed stable, he was falsely accused of a crime he didn't commit and thrown into prison. Years passed. He interpreted dreams for prisoners. He was forgotten by those he helped. He sat in that cell, alone, abandoned, wondering if this was how his story would end. But Allah was writing something bigger. A famine was coming, and Yusuf, through a dream interpretation for the king, rose from prisoner to the second most powerful man in Egypt. When his brothers came begging for food, they didn't recognize him, but he recognized them, and instead of revenge, he gave them mercy. When the truth finally came out, when Yusuf sent his shirt back to his father, Yaqub pressed it to his face, and his sight returned. After decades of blindness, after decades of grief, he could see again, and when they were finally reunited, Yusuf said, "This is the interpretation of my dream from before. My Lord has made it reality. Every betrayal, every pit, every prison, every tear. It was all leading here." Centuries later, the descendants of Yusuf, the children of Israel, found themselves enslaved in the very Egypt that Yusuf had once saved. A tyrant named Pharaoh ruled with an iron fist, declaring himself God, slaughtering baby boys to prevent a prophecy, and into this nightmare was born Musa. His mother, terrified, placed him in a basket and released him into the Nile, trusting Allah with her child. The river carried him to Pharaoh's palace, and Pharaoh's wife, barren, longing for a child, took him in and raised him as her own. Musa grew up in the house of the enemy, not knowing who he really was, until one day he saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew slave. Musa intervened, and in the struggle the Egyptian died. Musa fled Egypt, spent years in exile, married, became a shepherd, and then on a cold night he saw a fire on Mount Sinai. He walked toward it, and Allah spoke, "Remove your sandals. Indeed, you are in the sacred valley, and I have chosen you, so listen to what is revealed. Indeed, I am Allah. There is no deity except me, so worship me." Musa was sent back to Egypt, not as a fugitive, but as a messenger. He stood before Pharaoh, staff in hand, and said, "Let my people go." Pharaoh laughed. So Allah sent plagues, locusts, frogs, blood, darkness. And finally Musa led his people out, but Pharaoh chased them to the edge of the Red Sea, the ocean ahead, the army behind. Mothers held their children and wept, certain this was the end, and Musa raised his staff, and the sea split. Water stood like walls of glass on either side, and the people walked through on dry land, carrying their babies, their elders, their hope. And when Pharaoh's army followed, the walls collapsed, and the tyrant who declared himself God drowned like a dog. When Allah opens a path, armies can't close it. Musa was joined by his brother, Harun, who became his voice, his support, his partner in prophethood. From their lineage came Dawood, a shepherd boy who killed the giant Goliath with a single stone and became king, singing psalms that still echo today. His son, Sulaiman, was given a kingdom. Unlike any other, he commanded jinn, spoke to birds, controlled the wind itself. Ilyas and Al-Yasa called people back to monotheism when they had abandoned it for Baal. Each one carried the message forward. Each one faced rejection. Each one trusted Allah when the world turned dark. Do you see it now? The pattern, the thread. Every prophet faced the same test. Will you stand alone for truth, even when the whole world calls you mad? And every single one of them said yes. But among all the prophets of Bani Israel, among the kings and the warriors and the miracle workers, there would come one whose birth was a miracle itself, a boy born without a father, a boy who would speak from the cradle, a boy who would heal the blind, raise the dead, and be raised to the heavens alive. His name was Isa, and his story would change everything. There are moments in history when the impossible becomes real, when the laws of nature bend, when creation itself holds its breath. And one of those moments occurred in a quiet town called Nazareth, in the womb of a woman named Maryam. She was young, innocent, devoted to Allah in a way that made the angels themselves jealous. She spent her days in the temple, worshipping, praying, isolated from the world. And one day, as she withdrew to a private place, a figure appeared before her, an angel in the form of a perfect man. She was terrified. "I seek refuge in the most merciful from you. If you are God-fearing, do not come near." But the angel spoke with a voice that shook her soul. "I am only the messenger of your Lord, to give you news of a pure boy." Maryam's heart stopped. "How can I have a boy when no man has touched me, and I have not been unchaste?" And the angel replied, "It is easy for Allah, and we will make him a sign to the people and a mercy from us. It is a matter already decreed." 9 months later, alone, in labor, beneath a palm tree in the desert, Maryam gave birth. She wept, not from pain, but from fear. "I wish I had died before this and was forgotten," because she knew what people would say. She knew the accusations that would come. But then, from the cradle, a voice spoke. A newborn child, hours old, who had never tasted milk, opened his mouth and said, "I am the servant of Allah. He has given me the scripture and made me a prophet." His name was Isa, known to the world as Jesus. And from that moment, his life was a walking miracle. Isa grew up under the shadow of suspicion. People whispered, they pointed, they called his mother names she didn't deserve. But Isa didn't defend himself with words. He defended himself with truth made manifest. He would take clay, shape it into the form of a bird, breathe into it, and it would fly. He would place his hands on a man born blind, and when he lifted them, the man would see his mother's face for the first time. He would stand before a tomb, sealed for days, the body inside cold and rotting, and call out, "Gi, come forth!" And the dead would walk, not because Isa was divine, but because Allah had given him the authority to show people that life and death are not random. They are deliberate. They are signs, and every miracle Isa performed was followed by the same message: "Worship Allah, my Lord and your Lord." He never asked to be worshipped. He never claimed to be God. He was a prophet, like those before him, calling people back to Tawheed, to the oneness of Allah. But the religious leaders of his time hated him, not because he was wrong, but because he exposed them. He called out their hypocrisy. He healed on the Sabbath when they said it was forbidden. He ate with sinners when they said it was unclean. He loved the broken when they said the broken were cursed, and they couldn't tolerate it. So they plotted to kill him. They bribed one of his own disciples, Judas, to betray him. 30 pieces of silver. That's what they paid for the location of a prophet. The night they came for him, Isa was praying with his companions. He knew what was coming. He had seen it in his heart. And as the soldiers surrounded the house, swords drawn, torches blazing, Allah intervened. The Quran tells us they did not kill him, nor did they crucify him, but it was made to appear so to them. Someone else, whether Judas or another, was made to look exactly like Isa, and that person was taken, beaten, crucified, while Isa was raised to the heavens, alive, untouched, saved by the very Creator he had spent his life serving. His mother, Maryam, watched from a distance, her heart shattering. But she trusted, even when the world told her story wrong. Even when they built entire religions on a misunderstanding, she trusted that Allah's plan was greater than human comprehension. And his disciples, those who truly believed, scattered into the world, carrying his message. There is no God but Allah, and Isa was his messenger. But the message would be distorted, twisted, turned into something Isa never preached, and for 6 centuries the world would stumble in theological darkness, worshipping a prophet as if he were divine, missing the very point he had died trying to make, until one final messenger came to restore the truth. The year was 610 CE. In the mountains outside Mecca, in a cave called Hira, a man sat alone in the darkness. His name was Muhammad. He was 40 years old, known among his people as Al-Amin, the trustworthy. But titles don't ease the soul when you're surrounded by a society drowning in ignorance. Mecca was a city built on idolatry and exploitation. The Kaaba, the house Ibrahim had built for Allah, had been filled with 360 idols. Baby girls were buried alive in the sand. Slavery was currency. Alcohol flowed freely. And the powerful crushed the weak without a second thought. Muhammad would retreat to that. In cave, seeking solitude, seeking answers, seeking something beyond the madness. And then one night in the stillness, a presence filled the cave. The angel Jibril appeared, massive, overwhelming, terrifying, and commanded, "Read." Muhammad, trembling, said, "I cannot read." The angel seized him, squeezed him until he thought his ribs would break, and repeated, "Read." "I cannot read." Again, the crushing grip. And then the words that would change human history. "Read in the name of your Lord who created man from a clinging substance. Read, and your Lord is the most generous, who taught by the pen, taught man that which he knew not." Muhammad stumbled out of the cave, shaking, terrified, convinced he was losing his mind. He ran home to his wife, Khadijah, and collapsed into her arms. "Cover me, cover me." And she held him, this woman of strength and certainty, and said words every believer should memorize. "Never, by Allah, Allah will never disgrace you. You keep good relations with your family, you help the poor, you serve your guests, and you assist those afflicted with calamities." She believed in him before anyone else did, and that belief became the foundation of Islam. For 13 years, Muhammad called his people to the truth in Mecca, and they hated him for it. They boycotted his family, no food, no trade, no mercy, until people were eating leaves to survive. They threw garbage on him while he prayed. They placed a camel's intestines on his back while he was in prostration. They tortured his followers. Bilal, a slave, was dragged into the desert with a boulder on his chest, left to die under the sun, simply for saying, "Ahad, one God." They offered Muhammad wealth, power, kingship, anything, if he would just stop, and he said, "If they placed the sun in my right hand and the moon in my left to make me abandon this matter, I would not, until Allah makes it prevail, or I die defending it." But the worst pain wasn't physical. It was the year he lost Khadijah, his wife, his anchor, and Abu Talib, his uncle, his protector, both in the same year, the year of sorrow. And still, he didn't stop. When the persecution became unbearable, Allah commanded him to leave. The Hijrah, the migration to Medina. It wasn't a retreat. It was a strategic repositioning. In Medina, the message flourished. A constitution was written. A society was built on justice, mercy, and accountability. And Islam, once a persecuted whisper, became a roar. 8 years later, Muhammad returned to Mecca, not as a refugee but as a victor. He stood at the door of the Kaaba, surrounded by 10,000 men, and the people who had tortured him for decades trembled. He could have slaughtered them all. He could have taken revenge. Instead, he said, "This day there is no blame upon you. Go, for you are free." Mercy, even to those who showed him none. 3 months before his death, Muhammad stood on Mount Arafat during his final pilgrimage and delivered a sermon that would echo through eternity. "O people, listen carefully. Your lives and your property are sacred. Return the goods entrusted to you to their rightful owners. All mankind is from Adam, and Adam is from dust. An Arab has no superiority over a non-Arab, nor does a non-Arab have superiority over an Arab. A white person has no superiority over a black person, nor does a black person have superiority over a white person, except by piety and good action. He paused, looked at the sea of faces, and asked, "Have I conveyed the message?" And they roared, "Yes, O Messenger of Allah." He raised his finger to the sky and said, "O Allah, bear witness." 3 months later, he died in the arms of his beloved wife, Aisha. His last words, "The highest companion in paradise." The final messenger had delivered the final message, and the chain of prophethood was complete. 124,000 prophets, sent to every corner of the earth, speaking every language, calling every nation, but we only know 25 by name. Adam, who fell and rose again. Nuh, who never stopped calling. Ibrahim, who walked into fire. Musa, who split the sea. Isa, who healed the broken. Muhammad, who sealed the message. Every single one of them faced betrayal. Every single one of them was mocked, rejected, exiled. Every single one of them stood alone when the world turned its back, but they didn't stand for themselves. They stood for you, for me, for every soul that would come after them, searching for meaning in a world that offers everything except truth. Their message was never complicated. There is no God but Allah. Worship Him alone. Live with justice. Die with dignity. And trust that this life is not the end. That's it. That's the message that prophets bled for. That's the message that split seas and toppled empires. That's the message that survived fire, flood, sword, and silence. And now it's in our hands. These were the 25 prophets of Islam. They carried the light through fire, betrayal, and blood. They stood when standing meant death. They spoke when silence would have saved them. They loved humanity enough to sacrifice everything for it. And now we sit here, comfortable, safe, with the entire message at our fingertips, and we have to ask ourselves, will we carry it now? Or will we be the generation that let the torch fall? The prophets are gone, but the message remains, and the question remains, what will you do with it? Say, He is Allah, the One, Allah, the eternal refuge. He neither begets nor is born, nor is there to Him any equivalent. Surah Al-Ikhlas.